in which case it is time for today's deep dive topic. So today's guest is Nici Jupp. Nici's the founder of Talent Gateway. You may have spotted her in some of the sessions previously as well. Talent Gateway specialises in giving businesses an unfair advantage by building the right team. Now, I know that Nici's the best in the business because when she was searching for a fractional CTO for her client back in 2019, that ended up being me. So she's in the right circles there. But yeah, anyhow, I am delighted to introduce Nici and her talk titled How to Get the Right Senior Team in Place Before You Scale or Exit. Welcome, Nici. The stage is yours.
Oh, thank you. How to get the right leadership team in place before you scale or exit. Can everyone see that? Yeah, cool. Okie dokie. Just a little bit about me. So as Graham said, I started my career journey in the corporate world, and then in 2012 decided that I would set up my own thing with a very simple mission back in the day, and that was simply to do recruitment better. What I discovered very quickly in the first year of trading is that businesses at different stages of their growth journey need very different things when it comes to how they hire and who they hire. And so since 2012, we have predominantly worked with businesses that are at the inflection point of where they've got an opportunity to scale, and they're either going to scale with the plan to get a further round of funding, or they might have exit as part of their strategy. So what I'm going to try and cover today for you is to give you some insight, some of it you will already know, I have no doubt, into what changes when you reach that scaling inflection point. Some of the common problems and mistakes that we see happen. I'm going to share a case study with you. It happens to be in the medical space, but we're sector agnostic, and I could speak to you about all sorts of different kinds of companies, but the challenges are the same. And then I'm going to share with you 5 what we call foundational pillars that if you apply them into your hiring process end to end, you are far more likely to hire the right people at the right time. So hopefully you've got something practical to take away at the end of the session. We're only a small cohort, so if you've got any questions as we go through, just jump in. I want to make it as interactive and conversational as we can. If I just start by sharing a diagram that I'm sure you've seen in various forms previously, but a standard growth curve of a business. And what we know is, yes, of course, it isn't as straightforward as this, and it's a lot messier, but the principle is correct. In the very early stages of your business, it's likely that you are a one-man band or a two-man band. Then you will reach an inflection point where you know you've got something in the market, you're getting some traction, and then you become what we would call a garage band. So you're a few mates, you hire people that you know and trust, you might have worked with them before, or you get them recommended by somebody that you know and trust. Then you've got some product market fit, and you reach what I would say is the second inflection point where it's an opportunity to scale, but you're likely to start to feel some pain at this point. And you need to take action, or you will decline or you will flatline at best. What you actually want is an uptick. So you want to start to scale the business. And I'm going to look at this purely from a hiring perspective. There's obviously lots of other angles that you need to consider inside the business. Some of the common problems that we see at this inflection point, so you're likely to be, I would say, in terms of size, you might be around 15 people by this point, 12, 15 people. What you'll start to feel, the cracks will start to show, and you'll start to feel some pain points. And the skill set of the people that you've got inside the business, those 10 to 15 people, they will be people who absolutely thrive on spinning lots of plates. They might have a particular specialism, but they like to do lots of things, very action oriented. They love that environment, fast paced, agile, responding quickly to things, less structured in terms of their approach. Again, these are generalisms, but this is what we see. And then in order to scale, you start to need some specialists inside the business, and you also start to need some strong leadership inside the different functions that you will determine that are necessary in your business in order to achieve your plan. What you might also see is that people who are in leadership roles will be people who have been spotted who just happen to be really good at what they do. And in many cases, that doesn't necessarily mean they're right to be in a leadership position. And sometimes that in itself creates some problems. The second common problem that you're likely to see is the business is lacking in terms of systems and processes. It's been all hands to the pump. I call it's a bit like a pirate ship. Everyone turns their hands to things and you're not necessarily following the same processes. So that is something the business needs in order to scale. So they are lacking. And you're likely to start to see bottlenecks, usually when it comes to decision making, because you will have one or two key people who are there to sign off on things and make key decisions within the business. So at this point, when you're starting to feel the pain and see some of these cracks start to show, there are two courses of action. One is you can either be proactive and do something about it, or you can react to a problem. The case study I'm going to take you through today is the latter. So it's how a company reacted to a situation, which isn't unusual. Proactive is we often work with clients who are going for a round of funding. And it's really important that you are proactive about thinking about your leadership when it comes to investment, because they will take a long, hard look as part of the due diligence process in terms of their confidence levels, in terms of the people that are leading your business. And the moment they smell that there is a risk, that certainly will make them wobble. And at the moment, there's lots of wobbles in the industry. Anyone who's trying to get funding at the moment will know just how tough it is. So making sure you've got a strong leadership team in place, or at least a clear strategy, is incredibly helpful when seeking funding. But I'm going to stick with the second one here and talk about a reaction to something that happens. Because of the pains that the business starts to feel, what you will find is that in many cases, you have a founder who is often the visionary, or co-founders who are very visionary. And then, I don't know if this is the case in Tom and Francis's perspective, often what happens is as a business starts to grow, that visionary gets a second in command, on my terminology, and they tend to run the business. So the case study I'm going to share with you today is a medical in-source provider. And in this business, what had happened was the founder was a clinician and he spotted an opportunity in the NHS for him to build a business where he would find clinicians that could then provide services to the NHS in that specialist area. He was very visionary. He managed to win some contracts, but he was very self-aware that he isn't an entrepreneur that wants to get particularly involved on the operational side. So put the systems, the processes, look at the contracts, everything else that goes into the business beyond delivering the service itself. He got his second in command. The business grew to about 30 people. And we'd worked with them on a couple of hires. But the second in command, and it isn't unusual, was burnt out. She was doing absolutely everything. So she was hiring everybody in the business. She was managing the contracts. She was looking at different service lines, HR, finance, you name it, which is great one side, but actually she became to making any decisions. So what normally happens in this situation is that you're feeling the pain. You've got somebody who is leaving. And often what people will do is they'll panic and they'll say, we need to hire a like for like. And the business, the entrepreneurial leader starts to panic because from their perspective, the business is falling apart because she's on the move So they pick up the phone and they might say, Nici, I need an ops manager. If you look at this size of the business, you've got an ops manager managing 30 people. That is not sustainable. So we want to avoid going for a like-for-like replacement, because when you are growing a business, in the early days, the role it grows further and further with that key individual. So it isn't realistic to try and replace like with. Also, often when you've got somebody who's key to the business who announces that they're going to leave, one of the risks is you underestimate how that makes the rest of the team feel, and you may well get quite a lot of fallout from that. So when somebody who's key to the business is going to leave, managing that has to be a priority, communicating what's happening and why it's happening. People often rush to hire, and they rush the hiring process because they've got a gap inside the business. An absolutely key thing that people don't do is they don't document what that key individual does as part of their role. Imagine when they started, if I was hiring somebody as an ops manager, I could stick into ChatGPT and say, give me a job description for an ops manager, and they'd give me a list of things that an ops manager does. The reality isn't what the ops manager does. Their role will be far bigger. And a big mistake is made in terms of just simply trying to hire someone based on a job title and job description rather than the reality of what they do, and neglecting the big picture. So what is the business trying to achieve at this point? So whilst it's reacting to somebody leaving, there is an opportunity here to be proactive and to take a step back. We always start by asking two really simple questions in this situation. The plan is that in 4 years' time, the entrepreneur is going to exit. They're going to sell the business, and it will have gone from a 6 million turnover to a 20 million turnover in that 4 years. So the two questions we need to ask and answer as part of the process is, what do we need as a business in order to deliver that plan in 4 years' time? And what do we already have? The process that we ran was really practical and really straightforward. So you've got a key individual, now with the job title of an operations director, who has taken on more and more ownership and responsibility across the business. Everything to do with finance, everything to do with HR, everything to do with operations goes through this individual, just by the very nature of how successful the business has been. But that isn't sustainable. So what we did is we have conversations with the CEO, really interesting dialogue in terms of the reality of what they thought the individual did. So let's just call them the operations, the OD, the operations director, this key individual. You ask the CEO, so what do they do in their day job? Oh, they do service delivery, they do the contracts, and the list is not particularly extensive. And the CEO believes that they'll just replace them with an ops manager and he will pick up everything else. You speak to the ops director themselves and you get them to write a job description of what they do now in their role, and at least 50% of the reality is missing. So if we defaulted to simply replacing like for, based on the information that we get simply from the CEO and the ops director themselves, 50% of the workload that they do day to day isn't listed anywhere. So if I went to market with a job description based on that, I'm not likely to have somebody in the business who can sustain what we need in order to deliver against our plan. So the third set of conversations to be had is with the existing team. What's the reality? So the reality, CEO thinks one thing, ops director thinks something, and the team thinks something completely different. What you actually need to do is unpack the reality of what the ops director is doing. Now, on a practical level, you just got a long list of everything that they do. And then you say it is unreasonable for one individual to be able to manage all that. So you then say, okay, if we as a business need to take on all that workload, what will the structure of the organisation need to be? So we need a finance function, we need an operations function, and we need a commercial function. So we've gone from being reactive to thinking, what does the business need in order for the exit to be achieved in 4 years? And then you list out the accountabilities. Who is accountable for what, for delivering what across the organisation? And once you understand what structure is necessary inside the organisation, so you're moving from entrepreneur, key individual, in this case, it was an ops manager who then became a director, you move away from having that single point of failure. If we look at it from a technical perspective, in a network, you can't afford to have that single point of failure. And in this case, the ops director was going to be that single point of failure. You take them out and you've got chaos. And what you actually need is an infrastructure that works well for the business that will ultimately enable you to deliver against the plan. So you start at the functional level and you say, we've got operations, we've got finance, and we've got sales and marketing. And if we've got those different functions, the next layer of questioning is what skills, capabilities, experience, and behaviours do we need inside the business in order to deliver against those key functions? Only at that point are you in any shape to go and hire somebody. So there is an awful lot of work that has to happen before you take a job description or a person spec from anybody and then you go and hire. So you've got a plan. In our scenario, the entrepreneur has basically, he's got a plan, he's going to exit in 4 years, you're going to have a 20 million turnover, you've got clarity in terms of the structure that you need. So you've got the entrepreneur at the top, you've got your 3 departments, you've got your finance, sales and marketing, and operations. Then you've got to attract the right individual into the organisation. And that's when the proposition actually comes into it. So if I'm going to hire somebody or hire a number of people, the proposition is different for, let's take one of the roles. So a chief commercial officer, for example, in this organisation. The context in which they're going to work in for one company is very different from another. So I've decided inside this medical services company that I need 2 individuals as opposed to 1 individual. So I need a CCO and I need an operations lead. In this particular company, the entrepreneurial leader was really clear that fundamental to their business, because it's in the clinical services arena, is quality. So when I'm going to market and I'm going to target people to take on these roles, it is very different for different companies. In this situation, the proposition for the COO and the CCO was they pretty much had a blank sheet of paper. It was, this is the sector we operate in, these are the customers that we've got, and this is the plan. Now, I could come, if I'm looking purely at their CV and I look at their experience, I might say, okay, they've worked in the right sector, they look like they've got the right experience, but context, the proposition to them is all around the fact that they've got pretty much 0 strategy in place. And part of the proposition to those individuals is you are there to set that strategy. And part of the hiring process is not only to share the proposition from the company to the individual. So if I said to you, Graham, I need a CTO for this company, let's bring this to life. Graham, I'm looking for a fractional CTO. My clients at the moment, their plan is they want to exit in 4 years. They want to go from 6 million to 20 million. But part of what we need from you and the right individual in this role is we need you to set the direction of travel and to deliver against that strategy as part of this 4-year plan. Now, I'm clearly articulating to you what the proposition is. And obviously there's more colour to that. Location, package, benefits, all that good stuff that we all know about. But the key to making the right hire is the proposition has to be right. It has to be clear and it has to turn your light bulb on. And why this is important, because I could say to you, Graham, the same thing. I'm working for a medical services company. They've got the plan to exit in 4 years, to take their revenue from 6 to 20 million. They've got a really clear strategy. And what I need you to do as the CTO is I need you to come in and deliver that strategy. Those propositions are very different. Now, you can be excited by both, but I'm going to spend a lot of money investing in you as a business. And what I need to know is not only are you excited by it, but you bring the right experience, and you can do that in my context. And this is where the depth of research that you do into the individual as part of your hiring process becomes really important, because on paper, Graham could look great for either of those contexts. I don't know if that's a word. Graham could say, yeah, I'm really excited. I've got all the experience. I've done this before. I've set strategy. You say, okay, Graham, but what was the environment like in which you set the strategy? And Graham might say, I had a team of X and they had this experience of Y. And you're saying, Graham, in this environment, there's just going to be you. It's going to be all on you. You don't have a team. And so you layer on and you want to build colour to that conversation and that research and that dialogue, because the CV will tell you one story, but the context in which you want that person to deliver is very different. So the clearer you can be about your proposition, the better. So coming back to Tom and Francis, it's very early days for you guys, but when you're hiring people into your early starter team, when you get to the point that you're going to be hiring people beyond your own network, it is vital that you are really clear about the environment in which you expect these people to operate. So, for example, you expect them to be able to work with very little input from others. Context is so important, and particularly in leadership roles, people often get a really good example is people often get wowed by a brand on someone's CV. And I was speaking to a founder just a couple of days ago about this, about they've made several mistakes because they were wowed by somebody having, it happened to be Google, but you get the picture. And it doesn't take away from the fact that person was great at delivering the projects that they delivered. It doesn't take away the fact that they were excellent at what they did, but they wouldn't be able to deliver in the environment that they were going to have to deliver in for this particular business, because they were only 30 people. And the individual that they did hire, and ultimately it failed, was genuinely excited by the opportunity to deliver and get involved in the strategy, but they were not right contextually for that environment, because they were used to having departments that support for different things. So the second piece of the proposition is all about what's the context and really being clear about that. So number one is the plan. What's the plan? What structure do you need in order to deliver? And then the second level down is what skills, capabilities, experience do you need in those departments in order to deliver? And then you start to think about building sort of the role requirements. Then so we're clear about what skills, capabilities and experience and behaviours we need from the individual. What's the proposition? Then it's how do we promote that proposition to these individuals? Promote is predominantly, it's two-way. So it's very much, if I was going to buy your product, and Sarah, I'm not purposely leaving you out, or Sophie, but I'm just thinking about the guys early on. If you are going to promote your proposition, your product, I do research before I buy anything, as does everybody. And it's exactly the same when it comes to a job. The moment somebody sees a job that they think it's attractive, you do your desk-based research. And you always have to be mindful of this when you're an employer. So you might use your favorite AI tool now to do some research. I often do. If I'm considering working with a client, I will do my research. You'll get it to look at Glassdoor, you'll get it to look at the website. So I think always being mindful that whatever people can find out there in the ether is what their perception is going to be about what you might be like as a company to work for. So promotion is being in the right place, saying all the right things, and being transparent about what you're like as a company to work for and what is on offer for the individual in this particular role. The process speaks for itself. In a senior role, I would highly recommend that you have, obviously you have senior people involved in the hiring process, but you must get them to spend time with the rest of the team. Who are they going to be working with? And also getting a cross-section of your team to meet the individuals before you get to a point where you're going to make an offer, because they're going to be leading these people, and you might decide that you don't necessarily want them to have decision making in the process, but you certainly want to get their input in terms of their thoughts on the individual who is potentially going to lead their department. And then finally, the perform bit is giving them everything that they need in order to be successful in the role. But that then comes back to plan. So you've got to be really clear in terms of how will you know and how will the individual know that they have been successful in the role between now and when you're going to exit. You go for your exit plan in 4 years. So all of the 5 Ps are interlinked with one another. And so it's a continuous process. And when we worked with this particular client, when we'd finished the process with them, they'd gone from having the CEO at the top of the organisation with what was the ops director. The first phase of the rollout of their new structure was to have a chief commercial officer and a chief operating officer and a finance function. We have also gone through the process again and gone through the next iteration of their structure so that they are constantly moving forward towards their plan. And the proposition piece evolves as the business grows. So it's important that you move around the 5 Ps continually to make sure that you deliver against your plan. And in terms of whether the process works, just as a funny piece to close with, we just did a video testimonial with the CEO, and I wrote down what he said in that video testimonial. He said, "I've never asked anyone to invoice me twice." He said, "and to be clear, I'm not going to ask you to invoice me twice." He said, "but if you did, I wouldn't mind." It was a tough process for them to go through, and to get it right and to build the right team. It genuinely is a detailed process. It isn't as simple as replacing light for. My recommendation is always that you take a step back, and rather than react to a situation, say, take control and be more proactive about it and treat it as a 5-stage process. the risk of mishires by responding simply by doing what I would call the business as usual hiring, where you say, where's the job spec we used last time? Let's reuse that and let's go to market. For these critical hires, it's really important wherever you can to be methodical rather than transactional about it. So that was a sort of a rather long-winded presentation, but I hope there are some snippets that people can take from that. So if there are any questions about even early stage, later stage businesses, I will hit the stop presenting, and feel free to dive in and ask any questions.
I thought it was amazing, Nici. I've learned tons from that, so thank you.